So this one pains me because I do like a lot of world building. I do like world building. I like putzing with world elements, factions, and magic items and characters and cities and maps and so on. I love all that. I'm a forever GM. Um, that is my joy in the game, right? Is building systems. I do like putzing with the game system over and over and over. Unfortunately, but I and to my detriment. But I also like sort of world building and little tweaks and bits, right? Making places, making adventures, stuff they'll never see or never care about. All to make everything real for me or more real for me and to guide me when I make adventures that everything, at least in my mind, fits logically. And it doesn't have to necessarily, they don't have to know it, the players. It's more for me. And I acknowledge that's what world building is for. And so why it saddens me to come with the tip that you should probably do less world building unless you love it. And the reason is because world building to the sort of what we think of as world building, right? Building all the places and um, you know the factions and the holidays and the calendars and the special food of the elves and blah whatever, all that crap. That isn't going to drive your play. Your players don't remember that. That's not going to drive their engagement in the game. It's just not. At least not in the short term. So, to drive player sort of interest and engagement in the game world and the campaign in the short term, so I think of it in three sort of lengths, right? Think of it in the immediate session, sort of the very long term, what is interesting to players, and then let's call it the epic term. What is interesting for a table over the lifetime of years, right? I've played with the same people coming in and out for years. So in the short term, right, in the today, what can I get you interested in right now? In this campaign, this game, right now, what I would tell you is work on your characters. Make the NPCs immediately interesting. And you might think, oh geez, so I have to write 20 pages of backstory for every character or detail out all their stat blocks or whatever. The answer is no, you don't actually. It's not that hard. Naturally, in stories, movies, RPG stories, we are drawn to characters. Characters are what we are interested in more than plot, and certainly more than what the elves eat on Sunday and what the church's holidays are. So characters. And you don't have to go super in depth. In fact, I would argue against it. Don't start with 6-page backstories and large gigantic relationship maps. Don't start there. You might get there, but don't start there. Start with 1 or 2 hooks. Done. 1 or 2 things. A quick description, no more than a sentence or 2. You don't need much. No one's going to remember it anyway. But if you say she has striking white hair and, ice blue eyes, boom, good enough. If you said, right, have a quirk, have a mannerism, an accent, one thing that they can immediately tell they are talking to that player or that character. And that's almost all you need to start with. It could be so as an example, in our current game, the reptilian alchemist Sestoth is awful. He's an awful guy. He is annoyed, grumpy, hates humans, doesn't like where he's at, doesn't like you when you come into his shop. He is condescending, rude, insulting. They love him. Why? Because of that. Because he's gripey and grumpy. He's sort of, right? He's a grumpy dude. He's a little insulting. He's got the dumb, hissy Cobra accent. And that's it. And they know when they're talking to him. They know when he's around. He has a shtick. They sort of know what they're getting. And that makes him fun. the sheriff of the town. I break into a really bad southern drawl, put my feet up on the table, and pretend I'm chewing on something, and put my hands back and ask them what they can do. What can I do you for? Right? And they know they're talking to him, and that just helps them quickly relate to him. They don't need to know much. They just need to know that one thing. They know that he's sort of lazy, and they're not going to get necessarily much out of him unless they really can persuade him or convince him. They know what the gig is. It can be super simple just to get them hooked and interested in interacting with the character. And then once you get there, once you have them interested in interacting with the character, then you can do all those other things you want to do. You can make the character, give him a backstory. You can make the character interesting. You can give him a hunted. You can involve him in adventures, right? The whole thing. You don't have to, but don't start with all the stuff. Because if you have 10 NPCs and you're detailing them all out, you don't know who the players are going to be interested in yet. So slow play it. Give them all 1 or 2 quirks and a quick description. They'll tell you who they're interested in. That's who you start. That's who they then start interacting with all the time. And that's who ends up with the interesting quests. And that's who ends up with the stories. And if you are really dying to highlight this other character, which they're not that interested in, either move those stories to the characters they are interested in, or have the character that they interact with all the time introduce them. Now they're invested in this other character because their buddy told them to be invested in the other character. So focus on your characters, make it quick, make it snappy, build from there. That'll get you, I think, more short-term engagement than actually almost anything else. Your adventures can be awesome. Your plots can be intricate and woven and thoughtful and detailed. Your world building can be Tolkien-esque. And one stupid ass guy putting his feet up on the table and talking in a bad southern drawl somehow trumps all that. Now, I am not bitter. I'm a little bitter, by the way. And it's taken me like a decade to learn. Start there and let everything else go from there. That would be my suggestion. That's the short-term engagement. Now you might be going, but you said there's 3 levels of engagement. And actually, I just wanted to talk about the short one, because I think that's the most important. And that's the one I think we miss as GMs, because I think we trick ourselves into thinking that because we like world building, somehow the players care as much as we do. And invariably they do not. Sometimes they do. And this year mileage may vary, of course. Remember, all GM advice is crap. Just remember that. So your mileage may vary. But in my experience, characters are the thing. Above plot, above world building elements. Now, having said that, so the second layer of engagement is, I call it the long-term engagement. So why would someone remember your campaign? They'll certainly remember the characters, of course. That is true. But what they really will talk about, they're not going to talk about Captain Thornton and his southern accent. They might remember fondly the Cobrat alchemist that always hissed at them and called them stupid mammals. They will sort of remember those. But years down the line, those memories will fade, and what will stick out to your players will be the really cool things they did. Right? It's going to be the cool things, the cool highlight reel of their character. I have campaigns that people don't remember a damn thing about, other than, oh my God, that was so cool, the final battle with my priest on the bridge, throttling Tomax, the demon of a lust for power, right? And actually magical power more than anything else. And I remember us fighting, and getting tossed off the bridge into the river, and and this is in hell, on the bridge on the demons in the demon city over the river that makes you forget everything, right? That's what that guy remembers. Why? Well, because that was a cool moment, right? Right. That was the best. That was a good moment. You know, that's what your players are going to now. How do you generate those moments? So I mean, I can't give you a tip for that. At some point, I mean, I think every game sort of gets there. I almost think you don't need a tip for that. I think role playing games by their nature are engines for generating those moments. How can you generate them? I mean, at some point, you just need to have enough set pieces. You have to be cognizant of giving people their spotlight, and highlighting their cool abilities and their cool things that their characters can do, and that those moments will come. And not all of them are the last battle in the game, though that's usually a big set piece. So there's going to be some of that. But but those cool moments are going to be that thing that people will talk about after the game is over. And probably not the characters as much. So that sort of fades, I think, in its importance to people, and that one cool memory or two cool memories sort of stick out. Oh, do you remember when you rode the mast onto the other ship, right? Stupid stuff like that. And then finally, I call it the epic engagement, which some people can't get because they don't play with the same people for so long. I've played with the same folks in and out for quite a few years. And I do drive that epic engagement and that world building engagement. So you can get that engagement once people realize that things they do matter in the game world. Now, might be able to do this in the short term. You might be able to do this in one session. But once people understand that they can touch the game world and that the game world will have a reaction to them and that reaction will make sense, then they'll engage with that game world. And then your world building makes more sense. If they do a prayer on a specific holiday and then something happens related to that prayer later on in the game, they're going to remember they're going to go look that holiday up and remember that holiday, right? That's Saints Day or something. In our most recent game, the players, as they explore the map and we make certain hexes then become safe, which is sort of cool, right? Now they have sort of a distinct interest in that map. When they burned down the Temple of Immortality and in fact lit the magical goop liquid that was powering it on fire and burned the vast underground reservoir of it, and it's still burning right now, putting a pillar of thick black smoke visible for miles, which helps them navigate now. That's a good piece of world building, and they remember it, and that sort of ties them to the world. But then there's, like I said, you can even get almost a longer engagement, and the longer engagement comes when these people have influenced your games or the campaigns one to the other, or they realize that there might be links between them and the things they've done in this game actually matter in this game, or not matter in the sense that, oh, you're screwed because you did something here, but matter in the fact that they have changed the world in such a way that now your history reflects it, and they're like, oh yeah, cool, I do remember when that happened. Oh, Saint Callus. Well, Callus is a player who, by the way, wrestled the demon off the bridge into the water. But now he's a saint, and he gives powers and stuff happen. Right? He's that guy. He's a guy that they can buy powers with. The priest. One of the swords from that campaign where it comes back, and it has more powers each time because each wielder adds their legend to the sword, as weapons tend to do in Bostonian. A fun and very recent one was that we played recently a 1930s pulp superhero campaign where they each had one power, one supernatural thing. Oh, I'm slightly stronger than, or hey, I knew martial arts, and that was a power, because in the game we were playing, martial arts really does make you good. Versus simply throwing, haymakers all day. But as it turns out, the reason they had those powers was because the Greek gods, had been trapped in Pandora's box. And that box was broken and exploded. The gods appeared, took residence up in the town, but when everything exploded, some of their divine essence was scattered into the atmosphere, and that infected some humans, and they got some super divinity powers. And that was a great game, and we had a good time, and that game ended, and then we played a superhero game, a real one, with the high schoolers, and they had powers, and then at some point in the game, they were fighting a villain called Hephaestus, which they knew there was Hephaestus in the other in the pulp game, but they didn't think much of it. But then the one character learned of they were asking around about their mother and father and their origins, the origins of their powers, and they realized, oh my God, I'm the daughter of a wind spirit and Ares. And at some point, they started digging around, and they realized, oh my gosh, this same gods are there. This is the sequel to the other game. So, and it was a little bit of a slow burn, and they learned of it piece by piece, but it was very satisfying, I think, for me, and it was also satisfying for them to understand that all that stuff had happened in the other game for real. It was all absolute history. And Ares and Hephaestus and their all those characters did indeed exist, had done all their stuff. It mattered to this game now in tangible ways. And that really sort of, not that they weren't hooked on the game, but it added that special hook, because now it's like, oh, these things don't necessarily end. There's a little bit of continuum here, and all the things we do can, they can have meaning. So, and that's hard to do. You have to play with the same folks for a long, right? You can't, it's hard to generate decades worth of sort of engagement in a session. So if I have a tip, my tip is, if you want world building to matter, as soon as you make something in the world react to them, and that they have had power over it in some fashion, they've done a thing and that has made a difference, then they're going to care a little bit more about that world. And the more that is, the more that your world building will matter, and the more they'll pay attention to those details. So that's it. It's not much of a tip, but it was an observation which it took me a decade to go, yeah, don't worry about all that extra stuff. Worry about the characters first. And that's it. And that's what I do now. I actually focus on little things about the NPCs, get them hooked, and the rest will come. So, all right, that's it. I will talk to y'all later. Have a good evening.